Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are getting into a really big one.
Absolutely.
We're looking at the story that really it laid the foundation for so much Western political thought, power structures, the rise, the incredible achievements, and then the spectacular fall of the Roman Republic.
Spectacular and, self-destructive in many ways.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we're starting not right at the beginning, not with the cradle, but actually with the crisis.
Yeah, the point of no return.
Which is...
Well, that moment, it's really frozen in time in the sources, early 49 BC.
Okay.
We're right there on the banks of Con River, northern...
Got it. And who's there?
You've got General Gaius Julius Caesar.
The man himself.
Just finished conquering Gaul, a huge success for him.
Right.
And he's leading his army south towards central Italy.
Now, the Rubicon itself, it's not exactly the Mississippi.
No, not at all. It's described as almost ridiculously small. Shadow.
You could just wade across it.
Easy.
Yeah.
But the legal weight of that river.
Yeah.
That was monumental.
Okay. So what was the law? Roman law was explicit. No general, absolutely no general, was allowed to bring a standing army south of the Rubicon towards Rome itself.
Precisely. To cross that boundary with troops under arms was, it was unequivocally an act of war.
Against the Republic.
Against the Republic itself, yeah. So Caesar's decision, leading his legions across, it signaled that the whole political system was irrevocably broken.
And a civil war was coming.
A devastating one. It was about to begin right there.
And what really gives this moment its power is the sheer historical scale involved.
Right. The backdrop.
3.5 centuries before this, Rome was, it was basically an afterthought, wasn't it?
Totally insignificant almost. So much so that a nomadic Celtic army could just march down.
And sack the place.
Sack it with relative ease. That was around 390 BC.
A huge humiliation.
Massive. Yet in the time between that low point and Caesar staring at the Rubicon.
350 years or so.
Yeah. Rome achieved something almost unbelievable.
Going from that provincial town
to the power that ruled pretty much most of the known world.
It's an incredible trajectory.
It really is. So our mission today, as we dig into these sources, is to trace that journey. We need to understand the structural genius of the system they built, why its greatest success, which was imperial conquest.
Right, the very thing that made them powerful.
Exactly. Why that ultimately produced the internal rot that destroyed it.
And what lessons that history might hold for us today, about military power, wealth, institutions.
All of that. It's a huge...
Okay, so to kick this off, we have to acknowledge something up front. The Romans were masters of propaganda, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Before they mastered the world, they mastered their own story.
And the origins of the city, they're just steeped in these colorful myths.
Deeply rooted. It was central to creating a coherent Roman identity,
So what are the main stories?
Well, you have two main versions, really. The most famous, the one everyone knows.
Romulus and...
Exact. The twins, the traditional date given is 753.
Founded on those 7 hills along the Tiber River.
That's the one. And these weren't just any twins, remember?
Right. There's the divine connection.
Their mother was Rhea Silvia. She was supposedly a Vestal virgin.
And the daughter of a king, Numitor.
Yeah, a deposed king. And the father, Mars, god of war.
It's quite the origin story. Blends sanctity, royalty, divine military power.
It really packs a punch. So they were abandoned, famously found and nursed by a she-wolf.
Class.
And when they grew up, they gathered followers to found a new city.
But there's a dark side right at the start. A very dark. Sources are clear. Rome's foundation was built on fratricide. Brother killing brother. Romulus killed Remus.
Yeah, during a violent argument over, the sources differ, maybe which hill the city should center on, or maybe about...
So Romulus wins, becomes the first king.
And names the city Rome after himself.
Okay, that's myth number 1. What's the other version?
Well, it's more of an addition, really. Much later, the poet Virgil in his epic The Aeneid... He wanted to boost Rome's pedigree even further. So he claimed that the city of Alba Longa, where Rhea Silvia was from...
The twins' mother's city.
Right. Was founded by Aeneas.
Aeneas from Troy.
The very same. The prince who fled the siege of Troy. It was a brilliant move, connecting Rome directly to Homer's...
Connecting them to the heartland of Greek culture, which they would eventually conquer.
Exactly. It sort of validated their later dominance. It's a powerful cultural flex, as you say.
But what's the historical reality? What does archaeology tell?
Well, it's much more prosaic, less dramatic.
It usually is.
Settlements existed there way back since the Bronze. By around 1000 BC, you see clusters of villages around those
So not one single founding moment.
No, the city seemed to have emerged gradually An amalgamation, really, of these smaller communities, probably around the mid-8th century, the early iron.
So the myths are rooted in a real, gradual coming together of people, seems like, but a kernel of truth from the legends does remain. Rome was ruled by kings initially, the regal period, they called it.
That's right. And they listed 7 kings in total.
Starting with Romulus.
Starting with the legendary Romulus, yeah. His reign supposedly ended around 716 B. Then you get figures like Numa Pompilius.
He's the religious guy.
Credited with establishing key religious institutions, the calendar, putting a big emphasis on Mars and Jupiter.
Okay, and then 5 others after.
Right. Ending with Lucius Tarquinius Superbus.
But this wasn't like, say, medieval European monarchy, hereditary.
Not exactly. The sources suggest it was quasi-elective, meaning after Romulus, the kings were apparently selected by an assembly of clan heads, the Curiate Assembly.
So even way back then, there's an element of selection, deliberation.
A kind of proto-republican tendency, maybe?
Yeah. But how reliable is this early history? 7 kings over 250 years.
Yeah, that's the huge asterisk, isn't it? It's highly...
The math doesn't quite work.
An average reign of 35 years per king. It's just improbably long.
So historians are skeptical.
Very. Especially since the earliest detailed histories we have, like Livy.
Livy.
They were written hundreds of years after these events, in the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC.
So likely a lot of looking back and tidying things up, creating a neat narrative.
Almost certainly. Retrospective fabrication to make it all fit.
Well, the narrative certainly ends with a bang, or rather, with a tyrant.
Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud.
He supposedly usurped the throne around 534 BC.
That's the tradition. And he lived up to the Superbus name, the ultimate tyrant figure in Roman memory.
What did he do that was so bad?
Oh, the list is long, according to the sources. Refused his predecessor a proper burial, which was a huge deal.
Okay, disrespectful.
Used brute force against the Senate, started constant draining wars, forced people into these massive unpopular building projects.
Sounds like standard tyrant stuff, almost.
It is, but it generated immense resentment. A pressure cooker.
And then the spark, the catalyst.
The catalyst, as always in these stories, deeply personal and dramatic, the noblewoman Lucretia. The sources recount that the final straw was when Superbus's son, Sextus Tarquinius, defiled her, raped her.
And her reaction.
Rather than live in shame, she gathered her male relatives, told them what happened, made them swear an oath.
To avenge her?
Exactly. And then she took her own life.
Wow.
That personal outrage ignited an immediate popular revolt led by prominent nobles.
And Superbus was kicked out.
Driven out in 509 BC. And the Romans, they looked across the water at the Greek city-states, who were also dealing with tyrants.
But they didn't choose democracy like Athens.
No. They chose something different, a mixed constitution. They chose the republic.
So instead of putting power just in one person's hands or just in the hands of the people,
right,
they built this system of checks and balances.
Right.
They built this system of checks and balance. What did that actually look like, this famous mixed constitution?
Okay, so at the top, in terms of deliberation and long-term policy, you had the Senate.
The famous Roman Senate.
Yeah, this was the aristocratic assembly, hundreds of men, all from the leading family.
The patricians.
Mostly, yes. They handled foreign policy, finances, the big picture stuff. It was the backbone of the oligarchy.
Okay, so the elite council. Then who actually ran things day to day?
That fell to the consuls. These were the senior magistrates.
Always 2 of them.
Always 2, elected every year for just a 12-month term.
Ah, so a built-in check on power right there. Can't get too comfortable.
Exactly. They commanded the armies, enforced the laws. Nominally, they had to be over 42. And yeah, they were almost always patricians.
So Senate is the aristocracy. Consuls are the executives. Where's the popular element?
That came through the tribunes of the plebs.
Plebes meaning the common people.
The common folk, yeah. The plebeians. The tribunes were officials elected primarily by them.
And what power did they have?
Immense power, actually, especially within the city. Crucially, they held the right of veto.
Veto? As in, they could block the Senate or the consuls?
They could block acts passed by the Senate or actions taken by the consuls. It was a huge populist balance.
So the elites couldn't just completely ignore the common?
Not entirely, no. The tribunes ensured their voice had to be heard, at least sometimes.
Okay, so that structure, that balance, gave the republic its initial stability. But you mentioned something else as being key.
Yes, the absolute cornerstone of Roman stability, and maybe their greatest legacy, was codified law.
The 12 Tables, 449 BC.
That's the one. A truly transformative moment.
Why was it so important? What was law like before?
Before the 12 Tables, law was mostly based on custom, tradition, and interpretation.
Meaning the patrician judges could kind of make it up as they went along?
Well, they could certainly interpret it in ways that favored their own class. The plebeians demanded transparency.
They wanted it written down.
Exactly. The result was this comprehensive law code published on 12 actual bronze tablets.
Where?
Right in the heart of the city, for everyone to see.
And these weren't just vague principles, right? They got specific.
Incredibly granular. They became the basis of Roman law for centuries.
What kind of things did they cover?
Everything. Court procedures, marriage laws, family arrangements, property rights, compensation for being wronged.
And even really small?
Yeah. The sources mention the level of detail is remarkable. Rules about boundary disputes between farms.
Okay.
Even down to the legal process for, like, removing a tree that fell from your property onto your neighbor's land.
Wow. That level of detail is amazing.
It is. And that deep concern for the practical administrative minutiae of governance. That's really the core legal debt that modern Western legal systems still owe to Rome.
The foundation of law. But even with written laws, the early republic wasn't exactly peaceful internally, was it?
Oh, far from it. It was defined by intense internal political struggle.
The conflict of the orders.
Exactly. Patricians versus plebeians.
And the divide was pretty stark.
Very stark. Patricians were the old aristocratic elite, the established families, wealthier, owned most of the land, held nearly all the political power.
And the plebe?
Everyone else, basically. The lower order. Common citizens, farmers, merchants, artisans.
And the tension came from power and money.
Power and economics, absolutely.
Yeah.
In the early days, the sources say even the elections for the tribunes?
The plebeians' own protectors.
Yeah. Those elections were often manipulated by the patricians to try and dilute their power. But the real powder keg was the economic disparity.
How so?
Think about the army. The plebeians formed the core of the citizen army.
They did most of the fighting.
The overwhelming majority in Rome's early wars, but the spoils of war, the new land conquered, the captured wealth.
Went to the patricians?
Disproportionately, yes. Plebeians risked their lives, came home maybe wounded or broke, while the patricians accumulated vast estates.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster. How did that even hold together? Why would the plebeians keep fighting?
That's the key question. What kept it going was constant pressure from the plebeians and slow concessions from the patricians.
Pressure how?
The plebeians used a tactic called the secessio plebe, the secession of the plebe.
They just left.
They literally walked out of Rome en masse, abandoned the city, went to a nearby hill, and refused to come back until their demands were met.
Leaving the city defenseless.
Exactly. It was like a general strike, but with existential stakes for Rome.
They would work.
It did. Over time, through these struggles and a series of laws, the legal distinctions were gradually eroded. Plebeians gained the right to marry patricians, the right to hold priesthoods.
And eventually the top job, like consul.
Yeah. By 287 BC, with the Lex Hortensia, plebeians had achieved full political equality, at least on paper. Laws passed by their assembly were binding on everyone.
So the legal conflict ended. Did that mean the social division just vanished?
Not really, no. This is very Roman. They were deeply conservative, deeply hierarchical.
Even after the laws changed.
Even after the legal barriers fell, the old aristocracy maintained a powerful social and political grip. And what often happened was that wealthy, successful plebeian family...
Let's join the club.
They essentially joined the ranks of the new combined nobility, the nobi. So the old family distinctions, patrician versus plebeian, were remembered and mattered socially for generations, long after.
So still an elite-run show, basically.
Fundamentally, yes. The Republic remained an oligarchy driven by elite families, even after the plebeians won their right.
Okay, so while Rome is dealing with all this internal class struggle, they're also constantly fighting externally. We have to remember, for a long, long time, Rome wasn't the superpower we think of.
Not at all. For centuries, they were really just an embattled minor power, as one source puts it.
Their control was pretty limited.
Just the immediate area around the city, really. Down the Tiber River to their port at Ostia, about it.
And their neighbors were stronger.
Often richer and more developed. To the north, you had the powerful Etruscan city. To the south, the wealthy Greek colonies, Magna Graecia.
Rome was kind of squeezed in the middle.
And frequently on the back foot. We mentioned the sacking of Rome by the Celts in 310.
That traumatic.
That really showed how vulnerable they were. A searing humiliation that echoed for centuries in Roman memory.
Did that event change things? Light a fire under them?
It might have been the key catalyst, Some historians knew that humiliation triggered a much more aggressive, relentless, militaristic outlook.
Okay.
Almost immediately afterward, they really started pushing outward, conquering their neighbors systematically, the Samnites, other Latin peoples.
Using that citizen army we talked about?
Exactly. Mobilizing that deeply committed citizen soldiery, landowners fighting for their state.
And it worked.
It did. Within about a century of that Celtic sacking, they'd conquered most of central Italy. They pushed north into Etruscan territory, and then they started
Towards those rich Greek cities.
towards Magna Graecia. And that brought them into conflict with a major Hellenic power.
King Pyrrhus of Epirus.
Right, around the 280s BC, this is where we get the term Pyrrhic.
Because he won battles, but...
He won several battles against the Romans. He was a brilliant general. But the cost, the number of men he lost,
was unsustainable.
Completely unsustainable against Rome's seemingly endless reserves of manpower. He famously said something like, "One more victory like this and we are utterly ruined."
So he gave up.
He abandoned Italy, realized he couldn't win a war of attrition against Rome.
And Rome took over the south. They claimed control of the key city, Tarentum, and that single victory did two things. It put them in charge of southern Italy, and crucially, it brought them right up against Sicily,
which was controlled by the dominant naval power of the Western Mediterranean, Carthage. The Punic Wars.
Here we go. This wasn't just another regional conflict. This was the defining clash.
For control of the whole Western Mediterranean.
Exactly. Rome versus the Phoenicians, or Punic people, as the Romans called them, based in North Africa.
And Carthage was a serious opponent.
Formidable. They were an established, sophisticated naval power, way ahead of Rome in that department.
How far ahead? Well, the sources tell us that around the time Rome was kicking out its kings, Carthage was already sending these long-range expeditions down the West African coast.
Wow, like exploring.
Exploring, trading, maybe as far as Senegal. They really knew the sea.
And Rome.
Rome was a land power. They had virtually no maritime tradition.
So a mismatch.
You'd think so. But this is where you see that incredible Roman adaptability and, frankly, stubbornness.
What happened in the First Punic War?
Against the odds, they decided they needed a fleet, so they built. Well, supposedly, they captured a Carthaginian warship and reverse engineered it. They learned on the fly, added innovations like the Corvus, a boarding bridge.
Clover.
And they just wore Carthage down over nearly 25 years of brutal fighting.
And Rome won.
Rome won the first round, Ended in 241 BC. They gained Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica. Huge gains.
But Carthage wasn't finished.
Not by a long shot. The Carthaginian general, Hamilcar Barca.
Hannibal's father.
That's him. He retreated to Hispania, Spain, and started building a new power base there, and apparently made his young son Hannibal swear an oath
of eternal vengeance against Rome.
So the legend goes, and that vengeance arrived with the Second Punic War, starting in 218 BC, triggered by disputes over a city in Spain, Saguntum.
And this is where Hannibal does the unthinkable.
Yeah, one of the greatest, most audacious military maneuvers. Rome expected a naval attack.
It makes sense.
But Hannibal gathered this massive army, infantry, cavalry, even war elephants.
The elephants.
And marched them overland from Spain through southern Gaul and then over the Alps.
Into Italy from the north.
Taking Rome completely by surprise. It was genius. And terrifying.
The battles that followed, they were bad.
Disaster. Absolute disaster. Hannibal inflicted several major defeats, but the worst, the most infamous.
Cannae.
The Battle of Cannae, 216. The Romans assembled this enormous citizen army, maybe 70,000, 80,000 men, determined to crush. Hannibal executed this brilliant tactical masterpiece, a double envelopment. The Roman legions were surrounded and, well, the sources say largely obliterated.
Tens of thousands killed in a single day.
Possibly the single bloodiest day in the Republic's entire history. It was catastrophic.
Okay, this sounds like the end. 70,000 men gone. Why didn't Hannibal just march on Rome right then and finish it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And probably his biggest mistake.
Why didn't he?
Well, historians debate it. He probably lacked the heavy siege equipment needed to take the actual city of Rome, which was well fortified.
Okay.
And he might have hoped Rome would just give up, sue for peace after such a shattering loss, maybe try to peel away Rome's Italian allies.
Rome didn't break.
Rome refused to surrender. This is where that Roman character, that gravitas and sheer bloody-mindedness really shows. They just absorbed the losses, raised new legions year after year, and fought on through sheer attrition.
So how did they turn it around? Slowly, and partly through the emergence of another brilliant general, Publius Cornelius Scipio Africanus.
He earned that name later. First, he campaigned very effectively in Spain, cutting off Hannibal's supply lines.
Taking the fight to Carthage's backyard.
Exactly. Then he convinced the Senate, against some up, to let him do the same thing Hannibal did, take the war directly to the enemy's home.
Invade North Africa.
This forced Carthage to recall Hannibal from Italy to defend.
Setting up the final showdown. The Battle of Zama, 202 BC, near Carthage itself, and Scipio won.
Scipio defeated Hannibal, a clash of titans. Carthage was utterly beaten.
What were the terms?
Harsh. Carthage was stripped of its empire, its navy, forced to pay a huge indemnity, reduced to basically a dependent city.
End result for Rome.
Unequivocal. Rome was now the totally dominant power in the Western Mediterranean. No question. #tag Arte expansion, expansion east, and cultural transfer.
So, with Carthage humbled and the West pretty much secured, Rome's gaze naturally starts to shift eastward.
Right, inevitably, yeah. The Second Punic War had already kind of pulled them in that direction.
Oh.
Well, the Kingdom of Macedon, one of the big successor states to Alexander the Great's empire, had actually allied with Hannibal.
Back in the wrong horse there.
Definitely. So Rome already had reason to get involved, and the other Greek powers, the city-states and league, they started seeing Rome differently.
As a potential ally, or maybe a useful tool.
Both, probably.
Yeah.
They started appealing to Rome to intervene in their own complex consquab.
Was Rome eager to jump in?
Actually, the sources suggest they were initially quite reluctant to get deeply entangled.
Really? Why?
Maybe they were focused on consolidating the West, maybe wary of overstretching. They fought Macedon starting around 200 later, the empire.
Another big successor state based in Syria.
Right. That's where Hannibal fled after Zama. But even after winning these major wars.
They didn't just annex everything.
Not at first. Often they seemed content to just impose huge financial penalties, tributes, and make treaties that favored their local Greek allies. Direct Roman administration seemed mostly restricted to the West.
Interesting. So a lighter touch initially. When did that change?
The real shift seems to come during the Third Macedonian War. It ended with a decisive Roman victory at the Battle of Pydna in 168.
Okay.
After that, Rome decided simply breaking up the Macedonian kingdom wasn't enough. They actively dismantled.
How?
They carved up its lands into several smaller, dependent client states.
Client states. What does that mean in practice?
It became the standard model for Roman Republican rule in the East. Local elites were allowed to govern their own territories, but they ruled on Rome's behalf.
So they had to answer to Rome. Send tribute.
Exactly. Send tribute, follow Roman foreign policy dictates. It allowed Rome to control vast areas without the burden and expense of direct administration and legions. Very efficient, in a way.
Okay, so client states become the norm. But then there's a period not long after, around 146 BC, where things get much...
Yeah, there's a noticeable shift towards extreme violence and perhaps even deliberate cultural erasure, driven partly by hardline conservative voices back in Rome.
Like Cato the Elder.
He's the most famous example. We mentioned him before. His relentless, almost obsessive refrain in the Senate.
Carthago delenda est.
Carthage must be destroyed. He ended apparently every speech with that, no matter the topic.
Talk about staying on message.
And eventually that sentiment won out. Rome launched the Third Punic War in 149, arguably on flimsy pretexts.
And the outcome?
Utter destruction. In 146 BC, after a brutal siege, Carthage completely destroyed. The city was leveled. Its surviving population sold in...
And the story about sowing salt in the field, is that true?
Probably a later embellishment, historian, but it captures the intent. They wanted to wipe Carthaginian culture off the map. You could call it an ancient genocide.
And this wasn't an isolated incident that year.
No. In the very same year, 146 BC, Rome finished its conquest of Greece. By making an example of the wealthy, rebellious city of Corinth. They leveled it to the ground, too.
Wow. 146 BC was a brutal year. Carthage and Corinth destroyed. It's in a clear message. Rome was now the undisputed and utterly ruthless master of the entire Mediterranean world. Okay, so Rome conquers militarily.
Yeah.
But culturally.
Yeah.
It was a different story, wasn't it?
A completely different dynamic.
Yep.
Early Rome, as we've hinted, was culturally quite rustic.
Simple, conservative.
Very conservative. Focused on agriculture, military virtues, family duty. That's the world Cato the Elder represented and wrote about practical guides on farming. That.
Still a city of brick, not marble yet.
Exactly. Public culture was fairly limited. Some comedies by Plautus and Terence, but not much high art or philosophy.
But they were good at absorbing things from others.
Incredibly good. Like a cultural sponge, we see it everywhere. Gladiatorial games, for instance, probably came from the Etruscans. And even Cato, the arch-traditionalist, his famous book on agriculture, it drew heavily on a massive work by a Carthaginian writer named Mago.
The irony.
Isn't it? But the biggest cultural absorption by far was Hellenization, Greek culture.
Which was just much more sophisticated.
Vastly more developed in philosophy, literature, rhetoric, art, architecture, you name it.
And the Romans just soaked it up, despite Cato's grumble.
They absolutely did. Stoic philosophy became almost the default worldview for the educated Roman elite. They started writing history in a detailed, analytical Greek style.
Building Greek-style theaters.
Reading Greek literature, hiring Greek tutors for their children.
You mentioned a funny detail about beards.
Yeah, it's a great little symbol of the tension. For the Greeks, especially philosophers, a beard was a sign of wisdom and learning.
And for traditional Romans.
Clean-shaven was the norm. Beards were seen as rustic or, well, Greek, and maybe a bit suspect. There were actual debates about it. But by the 1st century BC, Greek taste had largely won out in elite culture. It's often said that Rome conquered Greece militarily.
But Greece conquered Rome culturally. Precise. And that created this fundamental paradox. You have this increasingly sophisticated, Hellenized elite running an empire based on institutions designed for a small agrarian city-state.
Exactly. That structure, that republic, was about to be put under absolutely unbearable pressure by its...
Right. This is where the cracks really start to show. The successive conquest starts eating away at the republic from the inside.
Perfectly put. Rome became this incredibly effective, extractive imperial power.
Pulling in massive wealth.
Vast amounts of gold, silver, resources from all these conquered provinces, and crucially, enormous numbers of enslaved people.
Slaves. How did that impact Roman society itself?
It fundamentally broke the old social contract. That wealth and that slave labor was not distributed evenly at all.
It flowed upward.
Massively upwards. To the senatorial class, the wealthy elite, they bought up huge tracts of land across Italy.
Creating massive estates.
Enormous country estates called villas, and they worked them using cheap, disposable slave labor.
Okay, I can see where this is going. What did that do to the small farmer, the traditional Roman citizen soldier?
It ruined them. If you were a small farmer, maybe you spent years away fighting Rome's wars in Spain or Greece.
You come home.
You come home to find your farm neglected, maybe you're in debt, or you just can't possibly compete with the economies of scale of the huge slave-run villas next door.
So you lose your land.
You're forced to sell out. And where do you go?
To the city, to Rome.
To Rome. Swelling the ranks of the urban poor, the landless proletariat living packed into these huge, often rickety apartment blocks called insulae.
So massive wealth for the few, poverty and displacement for the many.
Exactly. Wealth inequality just exploded. It created this enormous, dangerous fissure in Roman society.
Did anyone try to fix it?
Yeah. There were attempts at reform, most famously by the Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus.
They were tribunes, right? Using that office.
Yeah. Yes. They tried to use the power of the tribunate in the 130s and 120s BC to push through quite radical land reform laws.
What kind of laws?
Basically, breaking up the huge public land estates illegally held by the wealthy and redistributing that land to the landless poor, the displaced farmers.
Trying to restore the citizen farmer class?
That was the idea. But they were met with extreme prejudice.
Violence.
Brutal violence. Both Tiberius and Gaius were assassinated, killed in politically motivated riots instigated by their senatorial opponents.
Wow. So the elite weren't willing to share the spoils? The message sent was crystal clear. The system, senatorial oligarch, would not tolerate peaceful structural reform that threatened their economic violence was the answer.
Okay, so that's one major internal crisis, wealth inequality and failed reform. What else was brewing?
Compounding all this was the citizenship problem? Ah, right. Rome ruled vast territories, but didn't make everyone a citizen.
Exactly.
Especially problematic was the situation with Rome's oldest and closest ally, the Italian peoples, the socii. These were people who lived just outside Rome, in Italy itself.
Yeah. Many had been under Roman influence or direct rule for 2 centuries. They fought and died in Rome's armies, shoulder to shoulder with Roman.
But they weren't citizens, didn't have the same rights.
Most didn't have full Roman citizen. No vote, fewer legal protections, less access to the spoils of empire. Growing resentment was inevitable.
And this led to war.
Directly. The social war bellum sociale, meaning the War of the Allies, broke out from 91 to 87.
The Italian towns revolted.
Many of them did, demanding full citizenship. It was a bitter, bloody conflict fought right on Rome's doorstep.
Who won?
Rome won militarily, but politically they had to concede. The Senate realized they couldn't sustain the empire without the loyalty of the Italians.
So they granted citizenship.
They passed laws granting citizenship to most of the loyal Italian allies, effectively unifying Italy under Roman law. It was a huge step, but born out of conflict.
And this war had other consequences too, right? It brought certain figures to prominence.
Crucially, yes. The social war really brought the rivalry between 2 major generals, 2 towering figures, to a head.
Marius and Sulla.
Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius.
Tell us about Marius first. He was the old...
Yeah, Marius was a veteran general, already famous for victories in North Africa against Jugurtha, and crucially, for saving Rome from migrating Germanic tribes, Cimbri and Teutone, back around 109-101.
A war hero and a political figure.
Very much so. He represented the Popularis faction, the one that appealed more to Bull versus...
But his biggest impact was on the army itself.
His lasting legacy, absolutely. The Marian reforms around 107 BC, he fundamentally transformed the Roman army.
From what to what?
From that traditional citizen militia based on land ownership.
Right, the farmers fight.
To a professional standing force. Soldiers now enlisted for long terms, 20, even 25 years. They served for pay.
And crucially, who were they loyal to?
This is the critical shift. The citizen army's loyalty was ultimately to the state, the republic, but this new professional army, their loyalty shifted.
To the general.
To the general who recruited them, who led them to victory, who got them plunders, and most importantly, who promised them land and a decent retirement bonus when they mustered out.
So the army becomes a private tool for ambitious generals.
Potentially, yes. It broke that fundamental link between military service and civic identity. The consequences were immediate and profound.
How so?
Marius himself used his military prestige and the loyalty of his troops to get himself elected consul an unprecedented 5 years in a row, from 104 to 100 BC. Totally illegal, but who could stop him?
The institutions were already buckling.
Clearly. And this set the stage for his rivalry with his younger, more aristocratic competitor, Cornelius Sulla. He represented the conservative faction, the traditional senatorial elite who wanted to preserve their power against figures like Marius.
And their rivalry turned violent.
Escalated dramatically. Fueled by competition for military commands, political insult, factional hatred. It finally boiled over into the First Roman Civil War in AD.
Sulla marched on Rome, like Caesar would later.
Sulla did it first. He marched his legions on Rome, defeated the Marian forces, and then did something extraordinary.
What?
He had himself declared dictator.
Dictator, like an emergency measure.
It was technically an old Republican office for extreme emergencies, granting absolute power for a limited time usually. But Sulla, he took it with no time.
Unlimited power. What did he do with it?
He launched the proscriptions.
Which were?
Publicly posted lists of his political enemies, Marians, opponents, anyone he distrusted. Anyone on the list could be killed without trial, and their property was confiscated by the
state-sanctioned murder and theft.
Essentially, yes. It was a terrifying purge to eliminate opposition and refill the treasury. Thousands died.
So Sulla is this ruthless figure who seized absolute power through military force. Why didn't he just keep it? Why didn't he become the first emperor?
That's the truly bizarre and fascinating part. After fundamentally reforming the state constitution to strengthen the Senate, in his view, killing his enemies, and securing his legacy, he did the unthinkable. In 79 BC, he voluntarily resigned the dictatorship, retired to private life, and died a year later.
Wait, what? Why?
Nobody knows for sure. Maybe he genuinely believed she'd restored the republic. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he thought he'd set such a terrifying precedent no one would dare repeat it.
But he left the underlying problem unsolved, completely unsolved. He showed that a general with a loyal professional army could seize the state. The terrifying question Sulla left hanging over Rome was, what happens when the next guy does this and decides not to give the power back? Completely unsolved. He showed that a general with a loyal professional army could seize the state. The terrifying question Sulla left hanging over Rome was, tag sex, Caesar, Pompey, and the collapse of institutions. And the stage was perfectly set for that next generation, the ones who learned Sulla's lessons.
Absolutely. The two giants who emerged in Sulla's wake were Gnaeus Pompey, was actually one protege.
Right.
And on the other side, from the Marian faction, the young man who barely survived Sulla.
Gaius is Julius Caesar.
The man himself.
So Pompey rose first.
Pompey made his name in the 70s. He finished off Marian resist Spain, helped the super wealthy Marcus Crassus finally crush Spartacus' mass.
Spartacus, right.
These victories gave him huge military clout back.
And he got major command.
Big one. As consul in 70 BC, he was given extraordinary power to deal with the rampant piracy problem in the Mediterranean.
Which was really bad.
Crippling trade. Pirates were even raiding the coast of Italy near Rome itself. Pompey conducted this stunningly efficient campaign, cleared the seas in just a few months.
Wow. Impressive.
Then he went east, took command against Rome's old enemy, King Mithridates of Pontus, finally defeated. He reorganized the entire eastern Mediterranean.
Ending old kingdoms, setting up new ones.
Ended the Seleucid Empire in Syria, made places like Judea and even Egypt into client states dependent on Rome. By 63 BC, he'd basically completed Rome's conquest.
Earning his nickname.
Pompey the Great. He was, for a time, the most powerful man Rome.
Okay, so while Pompey is conquering the East, what's Caesar up to back in Rome?
Caesar was playing the long game, building his political. He got himself elected Pontifex Max pre-4 BC, a lifetime position with huge prestige.
And he was a popularis.
Yeah.
A appealing.
Always. He used populist policies, alliances, and frankly, a lot of borrowed money to build influence and eventually secure the consulship for 59 BC.
But the Republic's institution, the Senate, they couldn't really control these guys anymore, could they?
Not individually. They were too big, too ambitious. So Pompey, Caesar, and the third powerful figure, incredibly rich Marcus Crassus.
The guy who beat Spartacus with Pompey's help.
Right. They realized they could achieve more by working together outside the stuff.
The first triumvirate.
Exactly. Formed around 60. It wasn't an official government body. It was a private pact between three men to dominate.
Basically carving things up amongst themselves.
Pretty much. Get land for Pompey's veterans, favorable deals for Crassus's business interests, and a major military command for...
And they sealed it with a marriage.
Yeah, Pompey married Caesar's young daughter, Julia, in 59 BC, a political alliance cemented by family ties.
So what command did Caesar get? He got what he desperately needed, a chance to win military glory and build his own loyal army, just like Pompey and Sulla had. He was given command over Roman territories in Gaul, modern-day France.
And surrounding areas. And between 58 and 52 BC, Caesar launched this blistering series of campaigns.
The Gallic Wars.
Conquering the entire region, winning incredible fame through his own written accounts, his commentaries, and accumulating absolutely vast personal wealth from plunder.
And building that loyal army.
A massive, battle-hardened, fiercely loyal professional army. The climax was the huge siege and defeat of the Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix at Alesia in 52 BC.
So Caesar now has the military muscle to match Pompey.
Exact. But while Caesar's star was rising in Gaul, the triumvirate back in Rome was falling apart.
How?
First, that crucial personal link broke. Caesar's daughter, Pompey's wife Julia, died in childbirth. Then Crassus, seeking military glory to equal his partners, decided to invade the powerful Parthian Empire.
How did that go?
Disaster. Utterly disaster. Crassus was killed, his army annihilated at the Battle of Carrhae. Huge Roman...
So the three legs of the stool become two.
Pompey and Caesar left, staring each other down across the political divide.
And they end up on opposite sides.
Ironically, yes, Pompey, maybe feeling threatened by Caesar's rise, drifted towards the conservative Senate faction. The op came their champion.
And Caesar?
Remained the figurehead of the popularis, the populist faction. The structural fault lines of the Republic had basically narrowed down to these two immensely powerful, ambitious men.
And conflict became inevitable.
Pretty much. As Caesar's legal command in Gaul was ending, he knew that if he returned to Rome as a private citizen without his army,
his enemies in the Senate, backed by Pompey, would prosecute him. Ruin him.
Exactly. So he maneuvered desperately to hold on to his command, onto his legions. The Senate, feeling cornered, demanded he disband his army.
Which brings us back to where we started.
Full circle, the banks of the Rubicon, January 49 BC.
Caesar chooses his army, chooses survival, iacta alea.
The die is cast. The Second Great Roman Civil War began.
How did it play out?
Surprisingly quickly at first. Pompey and the Senate leaders didn't really have a comparable army ready in Italy itself.
So they fled.
They abandoned Italy, sailed across the Adriatic to Greece to gather their forces there.
And Caesar followed.
Caesar secured Italy, then pursued them. The decisive battle came in northern Greece.
Pharsalus.
The Battle of Pharsalus, 48. Caesar, though outnumbered, won a crushing victory. Completely routed Pompey.
What happened to Pompey the Great?
He fled again, this time seeking refuge in Egypt, but the Egyptians, hoping to curry favor with the winner,
killed him.
Murdered him. A rather ignominious end for Pompey Mag.
So Caesar is victorious. What does he do?
He returns to Rome, the undisputed master. And like Sulla before him, he takes the title dictator.
Initially for a limited term.
Yes, but then he extended it. He pushed through a whole raft of reforms, some very long-lasting.
Like the calendar?
The Julian calendar, yeah. Reforming the old chaotic Roman calendar. It's the basis for the calendar we still use today, more or less. That's why we have the month July.
Okay. But he wasn't content with just temporary dictatorship.
No. The Senate, even those who had supported him, became increasingly alarmed, and the final straw came in early 44 BC. Caesar declared his intention to be dictator for life.
Ah, that sounds a lot like being a king.
To Roman Republican sensibilities, it sounded exactly like being a king, and they had kicked out their king centuries before for a reason.
So his fate was sealed.
His fate was sealed. A conspiracy formed, including some of his former allies and pardoned enemies.
The Ides of March.
March 15th, 44 BC. Caesar was assassinated in the Senate House itself, stabbed 23 times. The conspirators, like Brutus, genuinely seemed to believe they were saving the Republic.
But they were wrong.
Tragically wrong. #, the final death of the Republic and the dawn of empire.
Yeah, killing Caesar didn't restore the Republic at all, did it?
Quite the opposite. It created a massive power vacuum and triggered the final, most destructive phase of a war.
The old institutions, the Senate, They were just irrelevant now.
Completely irrelevant. All that mattered was who controlled the legions, who had the military power.
So who are the main players in this scramble for power after Caesar's death?
Well, three main figures emerged from Caesar's faction. First, Mark Antony.
Caesar's right-hand man.
His trusted deputy, co-consul at the time of the assassination. He had immense popularity with the troops and the people of Rome.
Okay, and who else?
There was Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, another experienced Caesarian commander, talented general.
Antony, Lepidus, and the surprise, and the big surprise. Caesar's great-nephew, Gaius Octavius, known to us as Octavian. He was just a teenager, wasn't he?
Only 18 or 19, but Caesar, in his will, had adopted him posthumously and named him his primary heir, giving him the magic name Caesar, and a huge amount of wealth. Octavian, despite his youth, proved incredibly shrewd and ruthless. He immediately asserted his claim and his desire to avenge his adoptive father.
So these three teamed up.
They formed the Second Triumvirate. Unlike the first, this was actually a legally constituted arrangement, giving them dictatorial powers to hunt down Caesar's assassins.
And they did.
They pursued Brutus and Cassius, the leaders of the conspiracy, to Greece and defeated them decisively at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC. Both assassins committed.
So the Caesarians won. What next? Did they try to rule together?
They tried. They carved up the Roman world into spheres of influence. Lepidus got Africa initially. Octavian took charge of the West, based in Italy and Rome.
And Antony.
Antony took the wealthy East. His job was supposed to be campaigning against the Parthian Empire, Rome's big rival over there. And he needed a base.
Egypt.
Egypt, with its legendary wealth and resource. And its queen.
Cleopatra.
Queen Cleopatra VII, who had, of course, previously been involved with Julius Caesar himself.
So Antony gets involved with Cleopatra.
Deeply involved. Politically and romantically, they had children together, which was awkward.
Why awkward? Well, aside from the obvious potential conflict of interest.
Because Antony, as part of an earlier political deal to patch things up with Octavian, had actually married Octavian's sister.
Oh, so he's married to Octavian's sister back in Rome, while shacked up with Cleopatra in Egypt.
Exactly. It caused huge political and personal embarrassment for Octavian and his fact. Played right into Octavian's hands, propaganda purposes.
And Antony made it.
He really did. His fatal political error came in 34 BC with the so-called donations of Alexandria.
Remember those?
He and Cleopatra held this bizarre public ceremony where they essentially granted Roman titles and control over vast chunks of Rome's eastern province to their own children.
To Roman senators, that must have looked
like Antony was trying to set up his own breakaway Hellenistic kingdom in the east, with Cleopatra as his queen and their kids as heirs, betraying Rome.
And Octavian seized on this back in Rome.
Expert. He whipped a public opinion, portrayed Antony as a decadent traitor enthralled by a foreign queen. He eventually convinced the Senate to declare war.
Not on Antony, a fellow Roman.
But technically, cleverly, on Queen Cleopatra herself, though everyone knew it was Antony he was after. This led to the final civil war of the Republic.
The War of Actium.
Decided by one enormous naval battle off the coast of northwestern Greece in 31.
Actium. How did it go?
Antony and Cleopatra actually had a larger fleet, more big warships, but their crews were suffering from disease, desertions. Octavian's propaganda had been very effective.
And Octavian's fleet.
Smaller, more maneuverable ship, commanded by his brilliant admiral, Marcus Agrippa, they completely outfought and outmaneuvered Antony's fleet.
Total victory for Octavian.
Decisive. Antony and Cleopatra managed to break through the lines and escape, fleeing back to Egypt.
But Octavian followed.
He pursued them relentlessly, laid siege to Alexandria.
And the end for Antony and Cleopatra.
Facing inevitable capture, both committed suicide in 30. Antony fell on his own. Cleopatra. Well, the story is the snake, the asp.
Probably poison.
Most likely poison, yeah. Ending the Ptolemaic dynasty that had ruled Egypt since Alexander.
And Egypt became Roman.
Egypt was annexed as a Roman province. Hugely important, gave Rome control of its immense grain wealth and access to Red Sea trade routes.
So Octavian stands alone, victorious, master of the entire Roman world.
Just like Sulla, just like his great-uncle Caesar before him, in a position of absolute military dominance.
And everyone must have been wondering, what now? Another round of prescription, another dictatorship.
Exactly. The world held its breath. But Octavian, he proved much, much ruder politically than either Sulla or...
How so? What did he do differently?
He learned the lessons. He understood that the Republic died because its institutions couldn't handle that kind of concentrated military power. And he saw what happened to Caesar.
The title dictator for life was basically a death sentence.
Precise. So Octavian avoided inflammatory titles like dictator or king. Instead, he carefully crafted a new position for him.
What did he call him?
He preferred titles like princeps, meaning first citizen, the leading man among equals, and imperator, which originally just meant commander or conqueror, implying military victory.
So he maintained the appearance of the Republic.
He kept the facade intact. The Senate continued to meet, consuls were still elected, the old offices remained.
But the real...
all the real power control control of the most important provinces with the biggest armies, control of the state finances, rested firmly in
a velvet glove over an iron fist.
That's a very apt description. By placating the political class, respecting the traditions and appearance while holding all the actual levers of power.
He managed the transition.
He successfully established the imperial system. Octavian, soon to be granted the honorific title Caesar Augustus by the Senate, became effectively the first emperor of Rome. The Republic, after decades of brutal civil war fueled by its own imperial success, was finally definitively #tag out.
What an incredible story, just tracing that arc from those, villages coming together, the myths they created, all the way through the Republic's rise, its complex institutions.
The mixed constitution, the Senate, the tribunes, that commitment to law with the 12 tablets.
Only for its own astonishing success in conquest to become the very thing that tears it apart.
It's the central paradox, isn't it? The synthesis seems unavoidable when you look at the source. The Republic's structures just weren't built to handle the consequences of empire.
You mean the professional army under Marius?
That shift in loyalty was huge.
The massive wealth inequality flooding in from the province.
Creating that social dislocation, ruining the small farmers.
And then the rise of these generals, Sulla, Pompey, Caesar, and who had the power and the ambition.
Yeah, the system generated more raw power, concentrated in fewer hands than its own institutions could possibly contain or control.
It seems like the violence used against reformers like the Gracchi just signaled that force was the only way to make change or preserve power.
It certainly set a dangerous precedent. If peaceful reform leads to assassination, then maybe military might.
Which leads directly to Sulla, then Caesar.
And ultimately to Augustus, who finally figured out how to wield that absolute power without getting...
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the final thought for people to chew on? The big takeaway question.
I think it has to be about inevitability. Given how militaristic and expansionist the Republic became, really from the 4th century BC onwards.
Was this collapse always on the cards? Was it baked into the system? A necessary structural consequence of their success?
Or could it have gone differently? Was the Republic genuinely betrayed by specific individuals, by the power-hungry figures like Caesar or Antony who exploited the flaws for personal gain?
Could men of greater virtue maybe have saved it even at that late stage?
Or was the system itself just doomed by the very forces that made it so powerful? That's the profound question. Was it the system or was it the men? And that's something worth exploring long after this deep dive.